when I was drinking and running at the same time, it gave me the excuse to keep on drinking because I was an athlete. Hey, I'm fired up. I fell in love with my running all over again in my sobriety.
Mm.
Because the one thing about sobriety, especially early recovery, oh my goodness, it's a long process because you're getting to know yourself all over again.
Or getting to know yourself for the first time.
Or getting to know yourself for the first time. I had to remember the things that brought me joy,
Mm-hmm.
authentic joy.
Hey y'all, hey y'all, hey y'all, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast. I'm your host, Ray Donovan. I'm really excited about our conversation and our guest today. We have a brother who is multifaceted, extremely dynamic. He lives out in LA, Pasadena to be specific. I think we need to make sure that we make that call out. But he's a long distance runner. He's an athlete. He's been in recovery from alcoholism for some time now, and also a proud part of the LGBTQ plus community. But I'm not going to get too far into his intro because I want to bring JT on. JT, welcome to Stacking Days.
Thank you so much for having me, Ray. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. I mentioned right before we got into this that I'm prone to ask really tough questions, and I figured I might as well just give you one right off the top here, out of the gate. JT and I have a lot in common. Obviously our sobriety, but also we're both huge fans of the Cosby Show. So, with that being said, I got to ask you, what's your favorite Cosby Show episode of all time? I give you two actually.
Thank you. I was like, bro, don't do that to me. Oh my goodness. Of course, it's The Night of the Wretched. The
The
Night of
Night
the
of the
Wretched,
Wretched.
when Vanessa decided to have big fun in Baltimore without the permission of her parents.
That's a good
That's
one.
number one. Number two, I think the one that gets me somewhat into my feelings would be I know this is a small one. This is like one of those hidden gems ones. It's the episode where Vanessa and Rudy kept arguing and fighting, and they had to go
Oh,
downstairs to the basement. I love that episode because at the end, when Claire and Cliff went downstairs and it started to rain, a beautiful score was playing,
mm.
and I love that. I just love the music from the show as well too. So those would be the two that I love. But I think as a bonus would be oh my gosh. I think it was the final episode of the first season when they had Lena Warren. So yeah,
Oh
definitely.
man. Wow, you really did dig into the crates there for those. I was thinking about this before I came on because I don't, I don't usually talk about the Cosby Show on this specific podcast, but I was like, what were my favorite episodes? Those are good ones. I didn't even remember those. I didn't even remember those.
Yeah.
Like the one that comes to my mind is the iconic one where Theo gets his ear pierced. Yeah, that's a good one. And then there was another one with Mrs. Farn. What was it? Claire was Mrs. Farnsworth or something like that. And basically, all the kids had to like live in the real world, so they had fake money to like use in the
Oh
home
yeah,
to
definitely.
yeah, that was a good one too. Yeah, I love Cosby Show. I wish I could own the entire series. But all right,
Here's a fun little fact. My
yeah.
living room setup is similar to the Cosby Show. I try my best to have
Oh,
my living room set up similar to the Cosby Show. Like have the two intake, like two, like my coffee tables right there, and two chairs on the opposite side with the couch and all that. So yeah,
man, that's you're a super fan, as they'll say.
I'm just a black child from the '80s and the '90s. So
There you go. There you go. It's funny. But the other day, my wife was talking to me, and it was Father's Day, and she was saying, "You're a great dad." And I was like, "You know what? I think I learned that from Heathcliff Huxtable." And just kind of left it there. And I mean, I feel like you could probably appreciate that.
amen,
Yeah.
amen.
All right, cool. Well, let's do what we came here to do. We're talking about recovery, sobriety, healing, growth. Why don't you take us back to the beginning of your story? When did your relationship with alcohol begin? And then we can kind of just chronologically move through your story and your journey, and get into your evolution into how you've come to where you are today, and what you're up to these days.
Definitely. Well, sir, I will have to say that, I was born and raised in the South. in North Carolina. As you see, the North Carolina flag is right behind me and
Yeah.
everything. And you know, growing up in the early to mid '90s, on the weekends, my parents, well, especially my dad, would have parties, especially in the summer. We had a pool table back in the day, so there were always people over shooting pool, having a good time, and drinking. I remember my cousins and my sister, we used to play this game called the liquor party. So you're like,
Mm.
liquor, liquor, the liquor party. We didn't know what it was. We just said we were just drinking liquor and whatever. And it's just so funny how I distinctly remember that, not knowing what liquor really was. We just knew
Mm.
that the grown-ups would drink it and would like to have a good time with it. Did not
Right.
know what caused the effect, when it came
Right.
to drinking alcohol. Um, I think when I was telling I was sharing this with someone earlier. I remember the first time of having a glass of like a alcoholic beverage. It was a glass of red wine in in May of 2005. I think May or June 2005. I was at my best friend's Ashley's house, and it was the night of her graduation. So she graduated from high school earlier that day, and I was that sophomore heading to the senior party. And
Mm.
right before of us going out to the lake or to the fire and whatever, Ashley was drinking some wine, and she was like, "You want a glass, babe?" And I was like, "Sure, no problem." And it was a glass of red cab, and that was the first time I ever had a glass of anything of an alcoholic beverage.
Mm.
Um, Within the next year or two, I started to drink, with friends, and that was it. But I do remember the first time I drove home drunk was when I was 16. I love that I'm saying this and part of my story, Ray, because this is gonna be a lot of new information to people listening to this. So it's
Okay,
like,
good.
it is what it is. It's my truth. It's my
I love
truth.
it.
My mama will probably be like, "Well, I knew you were drinking back then. I knew you were driving. So that was just nothing but the grace of God covering you."
Yeah.
But I remember driving home that evening, leaving my friend's father's office. He was a doctor in town, and I remember driving home as fast as I could in my Corvette that my dad gave me because I was like, "I'm drunk. I just need to go home."
Mm.
And I distinctly remember coming in, my mom checking on me, saying, "Hey, did you have a good time? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And as soon as she cut off the light and went to bed, I threw up everywhere in my bedroom, and it was watermelon seeds and everything you can think of
Wow.
because whatever, I was drunk and I was young and whatnot. But that started to elevate little by little, not as aggressively, but little by little, because hey, when you're a teenager back in Wilson, North Carolina, in the South, you didn't have a lot of things to do. That's just the
Mm.
way it was. You really didn't have a lot of things to do. I distinctly remember the night before I graduated from high school. There weren't a lot of gay men in town back then, but
Mm.
the ones that were there, I remember I went to this gentleman's house. It was about 4 or 5 of us. They're like, "All right, JT's graduating from high school tomorrow. Let's all take some shots." So I took a shot. I was taking shots. It was back in the day when Goldschlager was like the devil's nightmare or whatever you want to call it.
That's rough stuff.
It was. And I remember we all uh, hopped in his Jeep Liberty and we went to Legends, this nightclub in Raleigh, North Carolina. And all I remember was waking up at 2 a.m. and everyone was coming back in the car. I was like, "What happened?" They're like, "Yeah, you passed out. You threw up and you passed out, so you never made it." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
So you
And
never made it into the club.
I never made it into the club. I
Okay.
never made it into the club, but I do remember being severely hungover on my high
Yeah.
school graduation.
Mm.
When I graduated from James B. Hunt High School in Wilson, North Carolina, I was hungover, but I was smiling a lot. So,
Yeah.
but I was hungover. It was that young type of hangover when you were hungover, probably like the first 30 minutes of you waking up, and then you feel completely fine because you're
Yeah.
young, and you have tons of energy and all that jazz. Um,
Which makes it seem super manageable, right? Like the negative like side of the experience doesn't outweigh the positive of, I mean, assuming you make it into the club, of course, but like it doesn't outweigh the positive of the experience,
right,
if that
right,
makes
and there was that. That was my little trip with alcohol in my younger years. And then when I moved to Los Angeles at a young age, like right after high school, of course, I started to drink and have fun, started to work in the service industry. Now, the double-edged sword of working in the service industry, as you know, or if anyone else knows, if you work in the bar service industry, you're going to be drinking.
Yep.
Okay. You are going to be drinking. You're going to be drinking half off. You're going to be drinking either for free. You're going to be drinking on shift, this, that, or the other. Okay. So I was drinking all the time during my shifts or prior to my shifts or after my shifts. Yes, I will make tons of great money. I will make bank. It was awesome. I was in my 20s. This is pre pandemic. This was the LA golden years. What a time to be alive.
Mm.
I would go out, I would drink, I would spend most of my tip money, this, that, and the other. And it was a repeated cycle. Now, to show you and to tell you how toxic the service industry was back when I was doing it in LA, it was so toxic that even if I got so drunk and messed up and got suspended for being drunk and messed up, I will get hired. I'm not hired, excuse me. I will get back on the schedule just like that, like nothing even happened.
Yeah.
Because perhaps maybe it was the managers who was drunk as well too, or who was drinking as well too. So it was just like everyone was doing it. So it was revolving so much where it was just like, okay, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, this was like around 2013 to 2017. Now, after 2017, around 2018, I started having thoughts in my mind saying, you know what, maybe I need to stop drinking.
Mm.
I was like, maybe I need to stop drinking.
What do you
And
what do you think that was being driven by those thoughts just all of a sudden? Because it sounds like up until this point, everything was very much socially acceptable. There weren't really any kind of external, at least as far as I can hear it from your story, signs to say like this is an issue for JT. Like what at that point in time shifted for you where you started to kind of be a little bit more critical about your relationship?
it became an issue when it started to, one, affect my work.
Yeah.
It became an issue when it started to affect my relationships with people. I'm a very personable person and I love connecting with people. But when it became a point where people did not want to be around me,
Mm.
I was like, well, I'm pretty much a fun going, energetic, positive gentleman. What could it be? And when the math was mathing, there was one thing that kept popping up:
Right.
alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. So that was reason number two. Reason number three, I slowly, it did not happen until a few years later when I hit rock bottom. I didn't start to recognize my own self.
Mm.
That's what worried me the most.
Physically or like emotionally recognition?
Um, the physical part will be later.
Yeah.
It was the emotional part.
Yeah.
I didn't know myself because there were moments when I was alone where I did not feel as confident or strong as I used to be. You know,
Yeah.
everyone goes through the quarter life crisis. I always joke to people about the quarter life crisis. And I believe my quarter life crisis was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It was 2014, but I was still feeling fine. It was right before I approached my 30s when I would start making a decision about my alcohol use. And it got to the point where it started to elevate more of a big problem. When it comes to that big elevation, when it comes to legal stuff,
Hmm.
that was when I started to get in trouble. And
Yeah.
that was never fun. I got my first DUI in 2016. And I was so heartbroken about the fact, looking back at it now, I was not proud of the decision that I made. I was leaving work, I was almost home, and then bam, it happened. You know,
Yeah.
wasn't the best decision that I made because one, I broke the trust of one of my best friends, who's still my best friend now. Believe me, we went through a period where we're like, look, we got to heal from this. JT, I don't trust you for this point. I'm sorry about that, but I got to take some time, and I respect that. And I totally understood where he was coming from. So I used his vehicle when I had the DUI, and I wasn't proud of it. But the beautiful thing about, which I will talk about later, the beautiful thing about healing and doing the work, and when people see that you're healing and doing the work, that's when that door of trust will open again.
Mm.
And I'm very grateful for that. So I had a DUI, my first DUI. And then prior to that, I had a drunk in public, public intoxication. So it was those little, not little, but the first little legal thing that will pop up, and then it elevated to the big one, to the DUI. That's when I was like, okay, I got to get my stuff together.
Yeah.
I really need to get on board with the times of just getting myself together. Um, it
So what did that look like for you in 2016, 2017? Like getting yourself together? Did that just mean I just need to stop drinking and everything will be okay? Or like
I need to
what
I need to stop drinking and everything will be okay.
right,
It
okay.
was I need to start drinking and everything will be okay. But remember when I mentioned to you earlier, I was starting to approach my 30s, I started to think about a lot of things as well too. The one thing that I truly believe in from the get-go, my great grandfather, Carl Lester, I love him with all my heart. He's gone. He's an ancestor. He's been an ancestor for holy crap. It's 2020. Oh my God, he's been an ancestor for 20 years now. But
Mm,
he died when I was a freshman in high school, and I was raised with him. So I remember him pretty well, like very, very well. He
yeah.
died at the age of 99. I'm a true believer
Wow.
that he's my guardian angel. And there have been times where I should have been dead. I should have been in jail. I should have been institutionalized, but homeboy Carlessa Mitchell was looking out for me. But it was around 2017 and 2018, Ray, where right before the pandemic, when I was like, okay, I need to get my stuff together, I need to stop drinking. Then it elevated to, okay, if I need to stop drinking, I need to change my environment.
Right.
Okay. So for some reason, I'm not sure why, but Pasadena kept popping up in my mind.
So
Just out of
you're in LA and you're thinking,
I'm in
okay,
West Hollywood. I'm in West
okay.
Hollywood, Culver City area.
Yep.
West Hollywood, Culver City area. I'm in that area, and I just kept saying, why is Pasadena popping up in my mind like crazy? Didn't add it up together. Anyways, 2018 rolls around, 2019 rolls around, right before 2019, excuse me. When 2018 rolled around, that was when I said, okay, one of the things that I need to change in my behavior and change with approaching it my 30s of getting my stuff together would be I need to go back to school. I really need to go back to school. Um, I needed to change the environment that I was in, which was the service industry. One of the wake up calls, Ray, was a former colleague of mine. They were working, and that former colleague at the time was probably about early 40s. And at the time, I was about to hit 30. And I said to myself, there is no way in hell, excuse my language, that I want to be the age of 40 something and still wiping people's asses. Sorry. I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I decided to take the initiative of going back to school. So that's when I entered West LA College, community college, and began that in the beginning of 2019.
Mm,
So 2019, it was a time where, we had no idea what was going to happen a year later. But in the back of my mind, I kept saying to myself, something's going to happen. I'm not saying that I
mm.
predicted the pandemic. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that something's going to happen where it's going to require for me to do some deep, deep changes. And then little thoughts will come in my mind that I will say, you know what? I'm not going to live until be a certain age if I don't get my together. I kept saying that in my mind almost every week. Almost
Mm.
every week, I kept saying, I need to get myself together or I'm not going to live to see a certain age. I kept saying that for some odd reason. Not sure why, but I kept saying that.
Was it just like a gut sense of your reality, or was this based off of something maybe that you'd seen in your own life kind of transpire in somebody else's life, or was it literally just a gut feeling of yours?
Gut feeling. Gut feeling. it was that gut feeling of me saying, you know what, I really need to get myself together because I'm not going to live to see a certain age if I keep on doing this.
Yeah.
And I was so torn, Ray. I was so torn of doing the right thing, of getting myself together and still staying connected to the one thing that was bringing my ass down that I had no idea that it was really bringing me down, which was alcohol. So here comes 2020. 2020
The
arrived,
year.
the year.
Yeah.
2020 arrives, January arrives, I was temporarily working in the service industry, and I was just getting plastered all the time until the boss was like, listen, I gotta let you go. You're a great person, but you're drinking way too much. And then
Mm.
me being the brave person that I am, I was like, I know you ain't talking because didn't you just get down some vodka a while ago? And he felt shook
Right.
because I called him out. I was like, you're making it so normal for all of us to drink. So who are you to say that? He was like, okay, actually I'm the owner, so I can do wherever the I want to, and you need to leave. And I was like, all right, well, cool, later. Bye. And I distinctly remember that. And
Mm.
we wish him well. We wish him well now. All positive vibes, but he's still messy from what I heard. But
Right.
so um I remember 2020, March of 2020, I was about to go into school that week for a public speaking class over at West LA College. And the professor said, hey, y'all, just want to let you know, I have no idea if we're going to be showing up tomorrow because of this pandemic or because of this thing that's going on. So just to let you know, I'm not sure if we're going to be here tomorrow in class. And everyone's like, all
Right.
right, whatever. Bam, pandemic hits. Now, during this time, the it thing to do in March of 2020, March through June of 2020, if you are not doing this, you are not part of the cool club, was having your glass of wine, having your cocktail, having your drink, be in front of this camera and Zoom
Mm.
happy hour drinking with everyone and their mamas. If you're not doing that, you're not part of the cool club.
Right.
So I was doing that profusely on top of running. I'm still running throughout this whole thing, everyone. I'm still running. I'm still training. This is where the physical change is starting to happen, as we were talking about earlier. Here I am thinking that I am fit. I'm good to go. I'm still running. I'm looking at myself. I'm like, man, I'm lean. I'm looking good. No, I'm drinking way too much. I'm not eating
Mm.
at all. I'm isolated. I'm running up to 50 to 60 miles a week based on nothing. On top of
Yeah.
that, social injustice is going on, and I am protesting up and down the streets of LA almost every weekend because I'm mad, I'm pissed off, I'm tired of Black people being treated wrong. I'm just fired up this whole
Yeah.
time, you know? So during this period, during the pandemic, I saw myself being angry. I was so, so angry. And I'm not sure why I was angry. Was I angry with myself for allowing the enemy, the devil, to get to me? Was I angry with society for screwing up the lives and the welfare and the well-being of my community of Black people? Was I angry because this pandemic has happen and everyone is acting a fool? What was I
Yeah.
angry about? So it wasn't until August of 2020. I'm walking down the street here in Pasadena, August 9th of 2020, Whitney Houston's birthday, by the way, y'all. So if this isn't a sign of whatever, I'm not sure what it is. By the way, I'm a huge Whitney Houston fan, biggest Whitney Houston fan on the planet. I'm walking to CVS. Prior to me walking to CVS, I took a little nip of vodka. Okay. So
Mm.
I'm walking to CVS and I'm walking back home. And then the next thing you know, I wake up in an ambulance.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackanddays.com. That's stacknday's.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation.
And
Wow.
I'm saying to myself, okay, what's going on? What's happening? And I'm speaking to the medic, and he said, "Hey there, buddy. Hey, James. How's it going? Are you doing all right?" I'm like, "I'm fine. Who are you?" It's like, we're just we're just trying to make sure that you're okay, buddy. And you had a seizure, and we're taking you to Huntington Hospital right now." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't have epilepsy, so I'm not sure why I had a seizure." And then they went
Yeah.
deeper. They said you had an alcoholic withdrawal seizure. And I'm saying, okay. And then he, of course, as an alcoholic, you're going to lie. He asked the question, "Did you have anything to drink today?" I'm like, "Of course not." That was a
Yeah.
bold faced
Right.
lie. But,
Right.
you know, I was in the hospital that morning, and I was just chilling in the emergency room. And I remember this doctor coming in to my space, pull back the curtain, and he was looking at me like I owed him money. And I'm like, "Okay, hi." And he said, "How you doing, sir?" I'm like, "I'm fine. How about yourself?" "I'm good. Hey, I just want to let you know you got to get yourself together, man." And I'm just like, "What in the world? I have not even met this gentleman, and he's popping off on me." And he said, "Listen, I've seen you around the neighborhood. I've seen you
Mm,
run before. I've seen you interact with everyone in the neighborhood. You seem like a very nice gentleman. However, your liver is so messed up, and it's starting to get to the
mm,
point, you may get in cirrhosis or something, but you really need to get your act together. I'm to letting you know this from a straightforward and a on point way. I'm not going to mess around when I tell you this because I feel like you need to know this. You're a good guy, and you shouldn't let your life be wasted because of this. In a few minutes, you're going to have a social worker come in to speak to you." So after that, I was just flabbergasted. I'm like, "Okay, I can't handle all this energy right now." And of course, you can only imagine how my mind and my body's feeling, being hooked up and all that jazz.
yeah.
And then this woman, Ray, comes in. She's like, "Hi, how are
Just
you
like good
feeling
cop,
right?"
bad cop.
Exactly. And she's like, "How are you feeling right now?" And I'm like, "Oh, I feel horrible now." And I start to cry. And of course, it's the woo woo wah wahs of an alcoholic who's done too much and who wants to become better.
Was that the first time you made that recognition? What was going through your mind at that point? Like, were you categorizing yourself now because this doctor had shared the news that your liver was in a really poor place and the social worker was now standing right next to you? Or are you saying y'all got the wrong room? Like, what was going through your mind?
That was the point where I said, "Okay, maybe I really, not maybe, but yo, I really need to get this together." Because I've had friends, like best friends and people who care about me, say, "Hey, JT, I saw you the other night and you didn't look too good. What's going on?" I've had that happen to me before. However, I didn't have the point of a doctor straight up telling me, "Yo, check it," to the
Yeah.
point of getting admitted to a hospital and all that. That's never happened to me before, Ray. So right after that, it was one of those things where I said, "Okay, well, I really got to get it together, I guess." So when I was discharged, I was prescribed to Keppra, some the medication to prevent seizures or anything of that matter. And I was dry. I'm gonna say dry. I'm not gonna say sober. I was
Right.
dry for about 45 days. I was dry for about 45 days, and then my best friend, sorry, 30 days, and then my best friend came into town from North Carolina to visit me, and she said after her visit, she was like, "Hey, I love you so much. What is going on with you? What's going on with you?"
Yeah.
So I was to the point where I was still angry with myself because everyone is asking, "JT, what's going on? What's going on?" And the ignorant part of my mind is like, why is everyone concerned about me? Why can't everyone mind their own
Yeah.
business?
Just leave me alone.
Just leave me alone. And then there's another side where it's like, get yourself together. Please get yourself together. Here we are in October of 2020. My sister was getting married in North Carolina, and I went back home. And that was the last trip I ever had when I was drinking, you know?
Hmm.
Last trip when I was traveling, I was drinking. So I just remember that trip being a blur. It was an absolute blur. And right before I'm sorry, Ray. It was a blur, but I remember every single thing from that trip. And I think it was meant for me to remember every single thing from that trip so I can go back and say, you know what, this is where you don't want to be at again, you know?
Right.
My mom woke me up early the morning of me leaving to go to the airport. She woke me up and it was very, very early. And she said, I need for you to sit down in sit down at the dinner for a second, JT. And never, my mama never will never like, hey, I need to talk to you. She never does. I have not had that since I was a child.
Right.
So she said, listen, I love you very, very much, but you need to stop drinking. You need some help. And you need to stop because if you don't, you will die. And I'm not sure what I'll do without you.
Mm.
And if I was a fly on the wall, I know for a fact that I was probably looking mopey and looking down and say, okay, mama, I hear you and everything. And I know that she was hurting because she saw her son being this way,
And
you
probably
know?
had been for some time, right? And I'm assuming it took her a minute to kind of even get to a point where she could have that conversation with you.
Exactly. And here's the thing, in full transparency, my father is a functioning alcoholic. He's an alcoholic.
Mm.
He's still present, but he's still alive, but he's an alcoholic. So the fact that my mother does not want a part two of that, her being her own child, you know?
Yep.
So I remember going back, heading to LA. She dropped me off at the airport. She gave me a big hug and a kiss. She said, I love you so much. Please get some help.
Mm.
And I said, yes, ma'am. So I remember going through TSA. TSA stopped me. There was something in my bag. And I'm like, what could be in my bag? It was a big old can of beer. And I'm like, oh God. So,
You're like, all right, I'll start tomorrow.
uh, anyways, I had a layover in
Mm.
Chicago O'Hare, had a Bloody Mary, landed at LAX that early evening, stopped by one of my watering holes on the west side, had a couple of beers, got back home, back in my area from the train station, walked home, stopped by a girlfriend's house, one of my neighbors, to drop off some gifts from North Carolina, had a glass of Chardonnay, which was my last ever alcoholic beverage.
Mm.
And the next morning, Ray, I woke up feeling defeated.
Mm.
For the first time ever, I felt defeated. And I said, God, I cannot do this anymore. I'm giving it to you because I just can't do it anymore. I'm
Yeah.
tired. I was crying. I was sobbing. I called one of my dear friends from Pennsylvania, who at the time was sober for 5 years. She has about almost 9 years now. I said, "Hey, I can't do this anymore." So she gave me a link to a meeting to join that evening, and she was so amazing. That day she was on call for me. She was checking in on me every single minute. I remember that October the 15th, 2020.
Mm.
That's where it all began. October the 15th, 2020.
Wow.
And ever since then, here we are, uh 3 years and 8 months. I
That's
want to say
awesome.
3 years, 6, 7. Yep, 3 years and 8 months. We're here 3 years and 8 months.
Well, look, let me just say first and foremost, congratulations on arriving at where you are today after, such a a windy path that you've been on. So hats off to you. I mean, it's not easy, and I know what that feeling of being defeated at, how that feels, and you're, what they say, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but more so outside of that, it's just like you're afraid. You don't have any direction. You've basically pushed everyone away. So who's going to be there to support you? I mean, there's a
Mhm.
lot of ambiguity that comes with the territory and arriving at that moment in time. So I'm glad that you were able to find the support, find the community, and find it within yourself to stay the path. And here you are, 3.5 years later, able to tell the story, and and not maybe at that point where your gut was telling you that you might end up at, right? And I think that that's a huge testament to the changes that you've made in your life. So thank you for sharing that with us here.
Mm. Of
Um,
course. Thank you for allowing me to share it with you, Ray.
yeah, absolutely. I want to go back. There's just so much to unpack here. One question I had, and this was based off of a conversation that we had before we started recording, is that you'd mentioned the three best decisions that you've ever made in your life, right? One being moving to LA, one
Mhm.
being pursuing your sobriety, and the other being coming out.
Mhm.
And I have never come out, but I have moved around a ton as a young age, and I know how scary that can be. And obviously, I've been very vocal and open about my own journey of sobriety. I'm curious from your perspective and from where you are. You've done a lot of hard things in your life. Of those three decisions that have been poignant for you, which has been the most challenging to take on, or was one decision necessary for you to take on the other two?
Ooh, ooh, I love the way that you phrased that last question. I think the number one that was the foundation of it all, of where I'm standing right now, was coming out.
Mm,
I had to come out as gay. I came out as gay when I was 16 years old,
mm,
January 2006. And speaking of the Huxtables, here I am thinking my family's like the Southern Huxtables. They're like, oh, we love you anyway, son. No,
right.
my dad beat the crap out of me. I share this because this is my story. So whether he wants to hear this or not, or someone else did not want to hear this, sorry, it's my story. And this is who I am. And it's what made me into the fierce, unique, authentic, genuine, and handsome gentleman that I am today. Snap, snap. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But when he did that, it broke me. It broke me, but it made me to the person that I am today, because the lessons that I've learned about loving yourself and knowing who you are in order for you to live your life authentically and as pure and as real as possible was from that decision of coming out. And I'm
Mm,
so grateful for that, because if I didn't do that, Ray, who knows where I would have been.
right.
I didn't want to be a statistic, straight up. I did not want to be a statistic. I did not want to be someone who would bury myself so much into either sex or heavy drug use or any of that matter. I did not want to be someone who would marry someone of my opposite sex when I really didn't love them.
Hmm.
And because I was hiding myself, I did not want to do any of that. So I did that at a young age because I knew it was the right decision.
Yeah.
I remember every single I remember every single moment of coming out to my family, to my friends. I felt alone. I felt I felt alone, but I did have support at the time at a young age, because coming out in the South and in the Black community, that wasn't something that you do.
Yeah.
Coming out to Black folks in the South, they thought it was something that white folks did. That's just the way it is. But I was like, that's just not me. I have to be true to myself. I have to love myself. And I have to say, with me coming out the way that I did, even though it was tough, I reflect on it and I'm very grateful that I did.
Yeah. It's almost, and you obviously correct me if I'm off here, but it's almost as though you in some ways were avoiding a death sentence, right? Like in not in if you were not to have come out even
Hmm.
at that young age, you're walking that long walk to your own demise. And
Amen.
similarly, had you not taken the advice and heeded the words of the folks around you and your mother, that's another type of death sentence that you were strong enough and found the fortitude to move in the opposite direction of. And I think that that's a real solid trait, that clearly has been with inside of you for a long time, and it just didn't come out as you've kind of recognized your relationship with alcohol. So again, hats off to you. Those are hard things to do.
Thank you, sir.
I can only imagine. Um, you mentioned a little about your father. Obviously, we've heard about your mother and your great grandfather. So just these real like three pillars within the experience that you've had as growing up. What role does your mother and father play now in your evolution as a sober man? We know what role they had played in the past, but where are they today? Now that you're 3.5 years removed, from which was effectively a rock bottom for you.
Well, Ray, my parents came out to California in 2023 when I graduated from Cal State LA with my bachelor's in marketing, cum laude with honors. Had to say that.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate you, King. They came out here for the first time since I've been out here, and I've been out here for nearly half my life now.
Mm,
And it was a beautiful moment. It was great. Individually, my mother, Teresa, she is my rock.
mm.
She's my foundation. She's a Virgo. I'm an Aquarius. We balance
Okay.
each other out because she's grounded. And even though I may be free spirit and everything, she's my rock. I talk to her every day, twice a day, sometimes three. I love her dearly. She's my biggest cheerleader. I will move heaven and earth. I will move heaven and earth for her. If I'm at work and she needs some help with a computer issue or something, I will leave and I will step out the office and help her. I love my mother. She's the one in my life. I love her so much. She saved my life, and
Mm,
and she's fantastic. I am my mother's son, Ray, because her kindness, her compassion, her gift of service is everything that I have. I get from my mother.
mm,
And I have to say that I love her dearly, and in no ways of disrespect to my father. My father is my father. I'm named after my father. I'm a junior. He's a senior.
mm,
So what I know for sure, Ray, is my father's a good man. He's a good man, but he has some healing to do, and I can only pray for him every single day. I wish I can change him, but I can't change him, and we can't change people because
yep.
folks would probably want to change us back when we were drinking and doing everything and the other, but they couldn't do it, and we can't do that for other people.
Yeah.
So he's a man who I love dearly, but I have a boundary. And with that boundary, I don't want to compromise my sobriety. I don't want to compromise my mental health. I don't want to compromise the joy that I have each and every day. I don't want to compromise anything that can stand in the way of me being authentically happy and being true to myself. And I pray for him every single day. And I pray that he will one day be humble enough to ask for help or talk or to do something where it's like productive for a relationship for a father and a son. And I believe that black men are the strongest men on the planet. But what we need to do to become stronger is to heal. And in order for you to be the strongest you can be, you need to heal a wound.
Yeah.
And if you just act like nothing ever happened or you don't want to talk about it because you're from a different generation, I'm no longer accepting that excuse anymore because that's
Yeah.
bull. And we
Yeah.
need to heal together.
Yeah. I agree with you on that latter part. First of all, I also will throw a prayer out there for your father. I don't know him, but one thing that I recognize for folks who are of a certain generation and in their later stages, years of life, 60s, 70s, there's still an opportunity for them to turn a corner, right? But like everyone else, whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, you have to be ready to do that.
Hmm.
And there are a few things that are more heartbreaking to me than the prospect of somebody living out the entire rest of their life with the same unhappiness and hurt that they lived the bulk of their life in. So for anyone out there who is more mature by way of age, I hope that you can find that healing that JT and I are talking about right now, because there's nothing more there's probably nothing going to be more satisfying to you than to live the final years of your life out with a degree of happiness that has eluded you for so long. So I hope your dad gets to that point. Um,
Thank
Absolutely. You talk about healing. You talk about not, having any sympathy maybe for folks who are not willing to step into it and using certain excuses that kind of perpetuate their for lack of a better term, brokenness, right? I'm gonna like do a pivot here, and I'm gonna go towards the athlete in you, right? So you had been running since I don't know 2012 or something of that nature. You've been doing it for some time. I've talked to folks on this show who have found running, for example, or their athletic event or sport post their drinking years, like they've come into it in their sobriety, versus you who have been who's been very much in your addiction and now very much in your recovery and have been an athlete the entire time. So I guess my question to you is, in that space of being an athlete, long distance running is a competitive sport. I feel as though there's a lack of mechanisms for folks to be able to cope with the challenges that come with being an athlete, number one. And then this necessity to always be like the tough one and to power through it. So I'm curious what your experience was. Did being an athlete almost perpetuate your substance use and maybe prolong it for longer than it needed to? I'm just curious, like, what your perspective is on that through the lens of a competitive athlete versus just through the lens of being a man.
Well, you know what, Ray? That's a perfect way of asking because, I distinctly remember, I remember one time I was with a girlfriend of mine. We went out that Saturday evening. We went out to a place in West Hollywood, this bar. We're having a good time. We're drinking, we're dancing. Next day, Sunday, we had a half marathon and
Mm,
we ran it. And I smelled like a Jameson distillery. I kid you not.
yeah,
But with running, when I was drinking and running at the same time, it gave me the excuse to keep on drinking because I was an athlete. Hey, I'm fired up. I am fun. I'm good to go. And
yeah,
the environment that I was in, it was especially during that time, pre-pandemic, during that time, drinking and running was huge and it was heavy. It was really, really heavy. So every little thing that you did, you were either drinking right after a run or prior to a run or during a run, one or the other. It was just insane.
mm,
Now to go
yeah,
deeper though, I fell in love with my running all over again in my sobriety.
mm, that's
I
lovely.
felt like because the one thing about sobriety, especially early recovery, oh my goodness, in early recovery, it's a long process because you're getting to know yourself all over again.
Or getting to know yourself for the first time.
Or getting to know yourself for the first time. Yes, yes. For me, I had to get to know myself all over again. I had to remember the things that brought me joy,
Hmm.
authentic joy. Sorry, I'm going to segue right quick. Last night, I just finished the final episode of watching Sweet Tooth on Netflix, and I'm
Okay.
sobbing. And I'm sobbing because I started that show when I was in early recovery. It came on. It began June 2021, and I was 8 months sober, and that was what I needed the most. So seeing the last episode, I'm like, oh my god, I'm 3 years and 8 months. Oh, so I'm just like, God is so good.
Uh,
But I got to know myself all over again, and I got to know running all over again.
mm,
Ray, there were so many goals that I wanted to. There were goals that I used to say that I wanted to do. I wanted to travel the world and run. I wanted to A, B, and C this when running and running and running. That shit wasn't happening, part of my language. That wasn't happening if I kept on drinking and being a
mhm,
fool.
yeah.
Now, it took time because you know how the process in the universe works. It takes time. I distinctly remember it was October of 2022. October of 2022, September, October 2022. I was like, you know what? Let me just enter the Tokyo Marathon lottery just for ha-has and giggles. I'll never forget I was leaving my undergrad marketing class from Cal State LA and I was about to hop on the bus. I was at
Mhm,
the bus stop and I got this email saying Tokyo Marathon lottery result. Opened up the email and said, after a rigorous routine process of drawing. You've been selected. I'm like, are you serious?
That's cool.
So when you're doing the work as an athlete, I use my sobriety in the in the mentality of being an athlete. I have to do the work every single day. And as a runner, I have to do the work every single day because this is what's keeping me alive. So the joys that I have with running now, of running 5 world majors and having only Berlin left, running Boston Marathon, the Academy Awards of running, I just, it just brings me so much joy to know that my running has uplifted me to the point of mindfulness and calmness and connecting more with others as well too.
Mm, I love that, and I love the fact that you felt back in love with, an old friend.
I
Um,
did. I
which
did. It
which is
felt like I
beautiful.
was reconnecting with an old friend saying, you know what, it's been way too long. I've missed you. It's like I've missed you too. I've always been here, but I'm happy that we're both in the present now.
No, you talk a little bit about, and we talk about on the show quite a bit about doing the work, and I'm curious, in your process of doing the work, do you distinctly remember when you started to recognize yourself again? Like, when was the moment where you were let's kind of just like, oh, okay, there you are.
Um I remember I was 4 months sober, and one of my dear friends, Travis, he drove up from Arizona. actually, I messaged my friend Ashton, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" He's like, "I'm good, man. I built a motel over in Joshua Tree. Why
Mm.
don't you come over?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to do that. I think I might do that for my birthday." He was like, "I'll have a room ready for you." And I said, "Well, I need a way to go out to Joshua Tree." So I messaged my boy Travis. I'm like, "Hey, boo, you want to go out to Joshua Tree?" He was like, yeah." And he has, those fun, crazy things that white people do all the time, building a little van. He built a
Yeah.
van during the pandemic. And I can say that because I'm an inner white person at the end of the day too.
Okay.
So with his built van, Travis and we went out to Joshua Tree, and I remember that weekend. It was for my birthday. I felt peace for the first time,
Mm,
and I felt that peace where I reminded myself, I love to travel. I forgot how much I love to travel. I forgot how much I love to be in the moment and check everything out. I forgot that I love road trips. I forgot that I love moments of solitude and that. So February of 2021 was the first time I started seeing myself. And then Ray, a few months later, I got invited to do a photo shoot, a running photo shoot with Adidas.
mm,
And I was like, okay, here we go. And then a few months later, back in June of 2021, I got invited to do a photo shoot with the Rabbit Company based in Santa Barbara's female owned. They're fabulous, lovey Jill and Monica. I did that, and I was like, okay, here we go. The moment where I said the bitch is back was Chicago Marathon.
mm,
That was my first sober marathon. And you could tell it was nothing but it was nothing but God, the universe, the cosmos, and the spirit of Whitney that aligned that. Because, Ray, the start line of the Chicago Marathon is in Grant Park, and there's this Chicago High Hostel of Chicago was right near there, so all the runners are booked there. Okay,
mhm,
and I've stayed there before, so I remember going into the room, and there were these two guys sitting on their beds, and I'm like, "Hi, y'all." They're like, "Hey, what's going on?" I'm like, "I'm JT. This is like my third time running Chicago." It's like, it's my first time. It's my first time too. And these gentlemen were from the Midwest, and we're talking, and out of nowhere, I decided to share out of nowhere. I'm like, yeah, this is a big marathon for me. This is my first sober marathon, and I celebrate 1 year of sobriety next week. And I was like, oh shit, how did I just share that like with them so casually? And they said, are you serious? And I said, yeah. And the gentleman, Matt, said, dude, I just celebrated 1 year. And
Oh,
then
that's
Chris is like,
awesome.
yo, man, I just celebrated 2 years. So we're giving each other high fives. And I was like, you know what? That was nothing but the Lord to place me in a room with two sober men who love to run in that place to say, I got you. You're safe
Mm,
with me. We got you. And I remember running that race. It was not my fastest time in a marathon, but I was present.
mm.
And that's what mattered the most. So
That's
after
awesome.
that moment, that's when I knew.
I love it. I love it. I feel like there are so many good things to pull out of that story, and also I feel like we need to be, regardless of how long we've been sober. I don't know what it is that holds us back from speaking it out loud. You know what I mean? Because I think like in this type of environment, obviously we're teeing it up. This is what we're talking about, right?
Hmm.
But in those ambiguous environments where it's just like your day to day, I think we should be. I mean, and I'm not saying that you're not, because I'm just speaking from my own experience. Like, tell people that you're sober. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, because you never know who else around you is living that same life, right? And have walked
Hmm.
in similar shoes. So I appreciate that. I got a couple questions to close this out as I say, bring the plane in. One is a little bit of a fastball. One is a little bit of a softball. So I'll give you the option as to which one you'd like first.
Fastball.
Fastball, boom, here it comes. So in the days when you were struggling the most with your mental health, with your addiction, how would someone from the outside have known that you were struggling if you didn't explicitly tell them so?
Probably with the way that I looked, I was very, very lean.
Yeah.
Not only that, I wasn't together. I wasn't together. I wasn't grounded. I was saying random things. I was really saying random things.
Mm,
Random things I would do. I was having like a I don't give a attitude. And
yeah.
I do have I of course I have a I don't give a attitude, but with grace and with composure and all that jazz. My mom knew that I wasn't together with the way that I looked and the way that I was reacting towards people, and I was very short.
Mhm.
I was very short with folks.
Yeah.
And I'm usually not short with people at
Short
all.
short in that you were trying to kind of be small and unseen, unheard, or short as in you just really didn't have the emotional patience to have like a dialogue with individuals around
Everyone,
you.
every part of that, like, hey, hey,
Yeah.
I'm fine, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Are you
Keep
are you
moving.
still here? Yeah, and all that. They're like, that's not JT at all. So what is going on with him?
Yeah.
I knew it was an issue with myself because as I'm looking at my reading chair, behind my reading chair, right, I had empty bottles like a Skull Graveyard, Jameson,
Yeah.
and vodka and New Amsterdam. I swear, if I see New Amsterdam one more time, I'm just gonna be like, you know what, y'all, I should have had a profit or whatever. But yeah, it was.
I hear you.
I had like a graveyard of empty bottles. That's when I knew that I started to get to. I didn't know myself anymore because I'm like, why would I even have empty bottles hidden, like
Yeah.
little desk vodka, so I can take swigs out of? Like, why was I doing that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel you. I feel you. Last question. For someone who's sitting there listening, maybe they're on the fence, they're taking a hard look at their own relationship and they're saying to themselves, I definitely have an issue here. I've heard it from enough folks around me. I'm starting to hear it, from, myself, tell myself that I got an issue, but I don't necessarily know what my first step is going to be in moving in a different direction. What would you suggest to that person?
Contact me.
I love it.
Contact me.
I love it.
I'll
Short and sweet.
contact me. I'm here. I'm present. I'm here to listen. Give
Awesome.
yourself grace. Know that you're loved and you're a human being. And we all have to take a day one. We all
Yep.
had to take a day one.
Yep. Yep. With that being said, where can folks find you, JT?
At JT Chestnut, Instagram, JTCHESTNUT. And yeah, it's just, I think I want to say this, Ray. I really
Mhm.
want to say this, if you don't mind.
No, please.
For our community, I want to be present for everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, what background or anything. But for our community, it's so important to understand that in order for us to live our life authentically, we must be able to heal and to love one another and to understand that we are in this together. So when if you are someone who happens to have this issue, if you're a black person that happens to have this issue or a person of color, know that you're loved and know that there are people who are in the same community that have gone through the same ordeal. You do not have to be alone in this. I really want this stigma to go away that people think that a certain issue, which is a general issue for everyone, only belongs to a certain demographic. No,
Yep.
alcoholism does not discriminate.
Yep.
It does not discriminate. So I want our community to understand that you're loved. And if you need help, if you need support, we're always here.
It's out here for you, and I agree with you. And it's important that we make that explicit, right? And that's part of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast in the first place, so that folks like yourself, folks like me, number one, our stories can be told, but number two, we can also stand as resources for people who are in the struggle right now and don't necessarily know where to turn. So thanks for making that very, very explicit at the end of our conversation. And with that, look, JT, I really do appreciate it. I know that we just met recently, but I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I have no doubt that it's going to help somebody out there.
Thank you for having me, Ray. It's such a pleasure.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices in healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.